Here. So today I'm going to talk about Micron Technology. Okay, this is currently the largest holding in my portfolio. The price has come down a bit recently, so I thought I'd share some thoughts about it. The first thing I want to do is look at Dataroma. What have super investors been doing with Micron recently? So let's take a quick peek in Dataroma. In order to do that, you can just type MU up in stock symbol, hit enter, and then it'll show you. There's 11 super investors who own it. Li Lu, Mohnish Pabrai, it's their largest holdings for both Li Lu and Mohnish Pabrai. I think they both got in somewhere in the upper 30s, lower 40s dollars per share. You've got David Tepper. It's also the largest holding in his fund for Appaloosa Management. He did reduce it 22% in the second quarter, but he really reduced everything, okay? Still his largest holding. Guy Spear added a few quarters back. I think it's his fifth largest holding. Sequoia Fund, quite an increase in the second quarter. Added 54%. I think it's now their eighth largest holding at 5%. Seth Klarman. I mean, look at this list, guys. This is an incredible list of super investors who own Micron, and some of which have added recently. So very impressive from a super investor ownership perspective. I'll also note Mohnish Pabrai in his most recent letter to shareholders. I know a few shareholders, and he said about Micron, it's just getting warmed up. Okay, I know some of you noticed in the first quarter, Pabrai sold like 14% or so of his Micron stake, but still seems to be quite bullish on it. I don't think he sees it as one of these long-term compounders to hold forever, but it sounds like he's content owning it for at least the next 5, maybe even 10 years. But he is watching to see if the story changes at some point. So that's kind of a super investor overview, which is very bullish. I also want to talk about great investors that I've discovered who have presented really compelling theses around Micron. So there's 3 investors I want to highlight here. The first is Sunil Shah out of South Africa. Okay, Micron is the largest position in his portfolio. He no longer works for a fund. He just runs his own account. But this is a great podcast he did with Value Investor TV. So there's 2 parts. Definitely check that out. He goes a lot into, over the last 20 years, how has the DRAM industry changed, evolved. And there's a lot of great insights from him in these 2 podcast episodes. He also has a pretty extensive write-up in Seeking Alpha, okay? I guess he posts frequently in Seeking Alpha. So we'll come back to this at the end when we get into, what do these investors who are smarter than I am think Micron may be worth. The next one I want to highlight is Nitin Sacheti, okay? He is an investor with ARS Investment Partners. I believe Micron is currently the 6th largest holding of ARS. But there was maybe a 12% add in the second quarter. Now this is through MOI Global, so you have to be a member of MOI Global to watch this presentation. I think it's something like 35 minutes long. Again, fantastic presentation, and not dissimilar to the conclusions reached by Sunil Shah as well. So it's nice to see some consistency in terms of what some of these great investors are seeing in Micron. Bonsai Partners. Now this is from a little while back, quarter 3 of 2020. One of my favorite smaller investors, Andrew Rosenblum, manages Bonsai Partners. I think they manage, oh, do I want to guess? I thought it was, yeah, I don't remember. It's definitely less than 100 million, so they don't have to file 13 Fs. But I can't remember at the moment how much they manage. You can just go to advisorinfo.gov and search Bonsai Partners if you want to get into that. But this is a really impressive write-up as well. I loved how, he talks about the high level, right? What makes Micron attractive is how essential it is to human progress. Humanity has had multiple waves of productivity gains over the past 12,000 years. Okay, so incredibly long span of time we're looking at here. First big improvement came from the agricultural revolution, right? Huge development for humanity. Second wave, industrial revolution, harnessing machines to perform repetitive tasks on our behalf. We are now in the third wave of human productivity, the information age. Okay, silicon chips are now automating and simplifying information-driven tasks, and it's fascinating. He basically compares, these companies that are able to build these memory chips. He compares them to the world's oil fields during the Industrial Revolution. Okay, it's that important. And for those of you who have followed Micron, I'm sure you know this. In terms of DRAM, dynamic random access memory, there's really only 3 big players. Okay, and Micron is the only one in the West. Okay, it's the only one in the U.S. The other 2 are in Korea. So it's a pretty important asset to the U.S. at least. If you really take Andrew Rosenblum's thesis to heart. So it's a great write-up. Check that one out as well. Yeah, so let's get a little bit into the thesis here. All right, and I'll take a few points from Nitin because he's so concise. So the title here, the title says a lot. Leader in growing industry with supply side discipline. Now, DRAM used to be a terrible industry. Okay, back in the 2010, 2011, there were numerous players, and it was really a race to the bottom. Okay, there was no supply side discipline. And Nitin wrote a great book about shorting. Okay, how do you do well shorting companies? And one of the companies profiled in that book was a DRAM manufacturer, and it was a short bet for Nitin, and it went to zero. Right, it declared bankruptcy. So I'm sure he did very well on that investment. But it's great to see someone bullish on Micron who's watched the industry for at least a decade and has really seen, how the industry is transforming, how it's shifting from this commodity business into something, that's got more of a moat, more of a sustainable competitive advantage. He talks about the secular shift in demand, right? And Shah talks about this as well. Sunil Shah says there are 2 or 3 massive changes for demand in digital memory. Okay, one is the transition from 4G phones to 5G phones. And what he says there's 6 times as much DRAM in a 5G phone as there is in a 4G phone. Okay, so that's a massive, shift that we're right at the beginning of. Full service driving is another one. He says memory has to be on premise. You can't rely on the cloud for this full service driving, these self-driving cars. And then the use of GPUs in data centers. Okay, And keep in mind, big manufacturers of GPUs, NVIDIA and AMD. And if you look at NVIDIA or AMD, what they're trading at on like an acquires multiple basis, even on a PE basis, it is night and day from where Micron is trading. But a lot of the success of NVIDIA and AMD over the years, Micron gets to partake in that. These GPUs, they have DRAM. They have a significant amount of DRAM. So, yeah, those are three big tailwinds there. And why the GPUs in data centers? The algorithms to anticipate consumer buying behavior demand huge amounts of digital memory, right? Like if you go somewhere, you search something in Google, Facebook or Amazon, they're going to show you products that relate to those things, right? So it's this web of intelligence that these big companies are collecting, and that relies on DRAM in part. So those are some big tailwinds. Now Shah also gets a little bit into the moats. Okay, in digital memory there are two massive moats, and I thought this was really interesting. One is the patents. Okay, Micron has patents over the last 40 years. And these patents, they stack on top of each other, right? As innovation happens within a company, you can't just, starting from zero, get to the product that Micron is manufacturing today. It took years and years of innovation, and that innovation is protected in some part through these patents. And Micron, I was reading, it has something like 40,000 patents. Okay, this was interesting here. This guy who works at Micron has more patents than Thomas Edison. Okay, one of the most prolific inventors in the world, holds 1,335 U.S. patents. Okay, more than Edison, who had 1,093 patents. So that was pretty fascinating. I mean, he joined Micron in 1990, and he's still there today. So, 30 plus years innovating in the chip space. So that's cool. So that's the first massive moat, is that sort of patented technology. The second one is it just takes an enormous amount of capital to build the plants to be able to manufacture these DRAM and NAND chips. Okay, it's quite a complex process. So it's a huge amount of capital up front, and of course it's also that intellectual property that you really need in order to make it work. China is throwing a lot at this, trying to figure out how do we build these memory chips in-house. And Sunil, in his talk, said, China is 2 to 3 years behind where the U.S. is. And at one point, China had mandated that companies use Chinese memory chips in their products. Okay, and the companies, they couldn't do it, right? The chips just weren't where they needed to be to make products that actually worked. So it is a very tall order, and Shah actually goes quite a bit in these podcast episodes into why he thinks it's going to be a long shot for China to be able to do this. So that was pretty interesting as well. Yeah, so the idea here, the main thesis is Micron is trading like a cyclical, right? It's trading like the crappy company in the crappy, well, not the crappy company, the crappy industry that DRAM has historically been. Okay, that's how Micron is trading. I don't remember. Let me look in ticker what Turk. Let's try ticker. What the multiple is right now for Micron, and then what it is for NVIDIA. I mean, it's an insane difference. And I'm not saying those multiples should be the same. There should be a delta there, but it shouldn't be anything like what it is now. Let's take a look at where are we at with Micron on an enterprise value to EBITDA or EBIT. So enterprise value to EBITDA, we're at 7. Okay. Where are we at for, and you know, it hasn't been great if you look back the last 3 years, right? I mean, it got up to 21, okay, in early 2020. Am I looking at that right? No. I want to look at EBITDA. So, you know, it got down to 2. It's been as low as 2. And recently, it almost hit 10. Okay? Right now, it's at 7 for EBITDA. So 7, let's compare that to NVIDIA. So for NVIDIA, we are at 66. Okay? 7 compared to 66. So the thesis here, there's really 2 different scenarios that can play out with Micron. And, you know, there's some overlap here between Shah and Nitin in terms of what they're seeing. The first scenario, the market doesn't recognize the value of Micron. Okay? It continues to treat it like the dog that it's been historically. In that case, management continues to shrink the equity base with aggressive share buybacks, okay? As, you know, the company grows earnings, which is projected to grow at like 25% per year in the foreseeable future. So as the company grows earnings and grows that free cash flow, they dedicate a lot of that free cash flow to buying back shares. Because, you know, if the market is treating it like a dog, Micron knows it's not a dog. It makes a ton of sense to use the majority of that free cash flow to buy back shares at that depressed, you know, at the current depressed valuation. So that's one scenario, right? It stays a dog. That's great. Micron aggressively buys back stock. That's a fantastic outcome. The second scenario is the market recognizes the improved quality of DRAM manufacturers. Okay, and if that happens, the multiple expands, right, along with strong earnings growth. So you get this multiple expansion from right now is 7, maybe it gets up to 20 in terms of enterprise value to EBITDA. That's like a 3x multiple expansion on top of the earnings growth. So that's kind of what these guys are seeing in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, what they think is going to play out. But really the big take home here is we're in the very early stages of this massive technology trend in data, right? We're just at the beginning. So in terms of valuation, so Nitin, you know, not to give away his entire thesis here, but effectively he's counting on very aggressive buybacks over the next 3-4 years. And he thinks the free cash flow per share in 2025 is going to be about $27 per share. Okay, so if you take a very conservative multiple of 10, you're at a share price of $270 okay, in 2025. That's the thesis for Nitin, all right? $270 per share in 2025, conservatively. Now, in terms of Shah, we can look at the end of his Seeking Alpha article here. And the Seeking Alpha article, I think, was in April. Okay, so 4 months ago. Just to make sure that's right. Yeah, 4 months ago. So, EV to EBITDA ratio, right? So now he thinks it should be 15, right? Like we saw, it's 7 now. So his target share price now, he thinks the fair value now is $127 per share. I haven't looked in the last couple of days. I think Micron is trading somewhere around $75 per share. So that's a pretty significant discount in terms of fair value. Now, in just the next 12 months, he thinks we're going to have this multiple expansion, right, to 20. And that would give us a share price of, along with earnings growth, give us a share price of $227 per share. That's just in the next year, okay? And again, this was written in April of 2021. So very aggressive growth projections here in terms of stock price for both of these guys. Obviously, they both own the stock. It's a pretty high conviction bet for both of them. So keep that in mind. I'm sure there are biases operating here. I also just wanted to see real quick with Rosenblum, Bonsai, how high a conviction bet currently Micron is. So we only have access to the Q1 through the website. I know you can get the Q2 letter if you're like on the mailing list. But as of Q1, you know, Micron was the second highest conviction at 14%. Okay. So just to give you guys some frame of reference there. So there you go. You got Shah. Within a year, we're looking at 227. That seems pretty aggressive to me. You know, in April, the stock was quite a bit higher than it is today. So I don't know, maybe there'd be a change. Maybe there'd be some tweaks with Shah here. But I'm more interested anyway in like a 3-4 year kind of outlook for the company. I don't like to own stocks for less than that amount of time. But it seems like we've got a lot of drivers behind Micron in terms of, you know, the outcome in 3 or 4 years. You've got, you know, an oligopoly with supply side rationalization, massive demand, and you've got a management team that seems, you know, pretty sound at allocating capital and certainly willing to buy back shares aggressively if the market is mispricing this thing. So, yeah, I think that's mostly what I have. Let me just take a peek in my notes and see if I missed anything. Oh, the other big thing, the cyclicality of the business, right? Historically, these DRAM manufacturers, they have these booms, these boom periods, and they've always been followed by bust periods where they go into the red, right? They lose money at the trough of these cycles. For the first time, I think it was 2018 into 2019, Micron in the trough didn't lose money. Okay, it stayed profitable in the trough. And there's actually something related to that I wanted to talk about. So in terms of inventory shelf life, okay, this has been a big issue for DRAM manufacturers in the past, where improvements in DRAM have happened fairly quickly, meaning inventory quickly becomes obsolete, right? These manufacturers have to dramatically cut prices on old inventory in order to move it off the shelves. Now, that picture is changing. The inventory shelf life has lengthened as we approach the limits of improvements, right? In terms of, manufacturing what's possible, in terms of what's manufacturing these chips. We're coming up to limits in the material physics space, okay? And what that means is the improvements aren't quite as dramatic these days as they have been in the past. So that inventory can still be moved off the shelves the next quarter, or a handful of months after it was manufactured, which in part is leading to the disappearance of this being in the red in the trough. Okay, it's a boost to the financial performance of these companies. So I thought that was interesting as well. I think that's it, guys. I will leave it there. I'm sure a lot of you own Micron as well. If there's any key points about your thesis in Micron that I haven't mentioned, please let me know in the comments. If you're short Micron, I love you. Let me know as well in the comments. I want to take in every bearish point about Micron that I possibly can. I'm not someone who wants to surround myself in this bubble of people who are bullish on Micron. I want to maintain as much rationality as I possibly can. So I invite you as well. Rip Micron apart in the comments. I totally welcome that. And with that, hope you enjoyed this, guys. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.